What are some of those boxes that you want to look for?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no gold standard protocol out there. I think if there was, then rehab would be a lot better, to be honest. But from what literature tells us, there are kind of like 2 to 3 major factors. And within those, there are tests that need to be done in order to consider someone as successfully cleared. There's somewhat of a time component. They told us that 9 months is the bare minimum for someone to return to sport. For me, especially for my adolescent female, so under 18 years old, like if I can push that closer to 10, 11 months, that's what I'm going to push for if I can. Obviously, again, we talked about those scholarships and things like that online. And if you pass all my tests and you're at 9 months, then you're good to go. Strength, probably one of the biggest components that is missed. So most places don't even have a way of testing strength. They kind of just look at you visually and was like, oh, you're good to go. That's like looking at someone's face and being like, oh, you're smart. Like there's no way to tell, right? You take a test, an aptitude test and things like that to measure, relative smartness. But that's one way of measuring your IQ and things like that. And for us, there's ways of testing your strength. So you need to make sure that they're at least 90%, ideally closer to 95% quad and hamstring strength. And that's obviously relative to the other side, the healthy side. That's some of the big things. And then you're also looking at neuromuscular control, like, so how well can you land? How well can you decelerate? That's a big component of what rehab should look like, is trying to make sure that they control their limb really well. Because again, after surgery and all the stuff they do within surgery, like it really messes things up. Like even you start thinking about walking, stairs, like all these basic tasks. So if they're thinking about those things, then what's going to look like when they get back on the field again, or back on the court again. Like that's the big thing, is that you should not be thinking about any of this stuff. So higher level single leg landing exercises, learning how to decelerate, learning how to control your body is super important. And then the last one is psychological readiness. I think that's something that's really not talked about enough. There's a test that I give to every single one of my ACLs. It's called an ACL RSI. It's basically it's 12 questions, self-rated. It just asks you questions like, how fearful are you about your knee? How frustrated are you about your knee? Like how scared are you to play your sport again? Things like that. Because there is a lot of correlation into psychological readiness, into physical readiness as well. So if you're not both mentally and physically ready, then I don't clear you. I have to figure out a way to boost both of them, whichever one is lagging behind. But to be honest, for the most part, if you're starting to feel really, really strong, your psychological readiness is going to start going up too. So they do usually go hand in hand. But those are the kind of the 3 to 4 main points that we really want to harp on before we clear someone to return to sport.